I know this world is constantly rushing. You have 100 reasons to skip this video. Maybe you are just scrolling for noise or searching for something to feel that isn't too heavy. But if you're still here, even for just a few seconds, I'm grateful. I'm not here to shout. I'm not even here to blame. I just want to tell you something that happened to me when I was 15. I rewrite this story with the patience of someone who was forgotten, not to win anything, but to feel heard. And maybe, just maybe, in these words, you'll find a small feeling that you're not alone either. If you do, leave a sign. Just a gentle touch on the like button, so I know. Someone out there is still listening. It happened at my cousin Lexi's wedding. Hudson Valley, middle of June, everyone dressed like a magazine cover and sipping rosé like it was currency. I wore a navy dress I bought myself, saved up for it with tutoring money. It was simple, modest, but it made me feel like I existed. Just before the family toast, Dad came over and tapped my shoulder. "Come outside for a second," he said, tone light, fake casual. I followed. We stood just beyond the patio, where you could still hear the clinking of champagne flutes. And then he said it, so softly it almost didn't register. "You'll be leaving for Fair Hollow Academy next week. It's a boarding school, specialized for children who need structure." I blinked. "What?" He didn't meet my eyes, just kept talking. "We've already signed the papers. Your mother and I agreed it was best. You'll get the help you need." The help I need? I felt a wave of nausea. Back inside, people raised their glasses. I stood at the edge of the crowd, alone, watching as my parents announced the school transfer as if it were a promotion. "Just a behavioral fit," Mom smiled. I never got to pack properly. When we got home that night, my suitcase was already by the door. Folded sweaters I hadn't worn in months. No art supplies, no journals. Not even the necklace my grandmother gave me. Mom walked past me in the hallway, barely glancing up from her phone. "Don't overthink this," she said. "It's not punishment, it's a reset." Dad didn't say anything, just loaded the trunk, humming off key to himself. We drove in silence to Fair Hollow, 3 hours north, surrounded by evergreens and fog that clung to the windows like breath. It looked less like a school and more like a hospital with vintage ivy. When we arrived, the headmaster shook my hand like I was already a problem he intended to solve. "Don't worry," he said to my parents. "We're used to girls like her." Girls like me? The phrase lodged somewhere in my throat and stayed there. I was assigned to Dorm C, room 112. My roommate was a quiet girl named Tamsin, who read horror novels and drank peppermint tea. She didn't ask why I was there. No one did. They already knew. I was the high-strung one, the overreactor, the one with an attitude problem. But I wasn't loud. I wasn't even difficult. I was just inconvenient. At Fair Hollow, I learned how to disappear with precision. Eyes down, voice flat, smile when spoken to, nod, but not too eagerly. The school therapist, Ms. Hawthorne, was the only one who didn't look through me. During one session, she asked what I missed most. I said, "Being seen." She wrote something down and nodded slowly. The days stretched long, each one bleeding into the next. I got good grades. I kept to myself. I wrote letters home, simple ones, updates, polite questions. No one ever. It started with a birthday card. Not mine, Tamsin's. She got 3 that day. One from her aunt, one from her cousin, and one from her mom, written in loopy cursive with smiley faces over the eyes. We sat on her bed opening them together. I smiled, genuinely happy for her. But something tightened in my chest. I hadn't received a single letter in over 4 months. Not one. I brushed it off. Maybe my parents weren't letter writers. Maybe they were just busy. But then, during our Sunday library shift, the librarian, Mrs. Callahan, leaned in as she stamped a stack of returns and whispered, "Your aunt stopped by 2 weeks ago. She brought something for you. I blinked. She did? She nodded, then paused. Said it was a letter. Handwritten, I never got it. That night, I checked with the mail clerk. He shrugged. If it's not in your box, it never arrived. I tried calling Aunt Marianne, straight to voicemail. When I called home, the house phone rang and rang until it cut off. I tried Dad's cell. Disconnected. Mom's voicemail was full. I told myself it was probably just a service issue, or timing, or something benign. But the next week, during counseling, Ms. Hawthorne asked gently, "Have you spoken to your family lately?" I shook my head. Not since I got here. She hesitated, then stood and walked over to her file cabinet. Pulled out a beige folder, flipped through it. After a moment, she turned it so I could see. The top form read, Intake reason, behavioral escalation/delusional, tendencies/risk of manipulation. It felt like a punch to the chest. I'm not allowed to let you keep this, she said softly. But I thought you should see what they wrote. Delusional? Manipulative? I'd never even raised my voice to them. Then I remembered. It arrived on a Thursday. A manila envelope, sealed with red string, tucked neatly into my dorm mailbox. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in ink I recognized immediately. My grandmother's handwriting. I stood there frozen, mailroom buzzing behind me with students laughing and shouting, but all I could hear was the blood in my ears. I walked back to my room with the envelope pressed against my chest. Inside were two things. A photocopy of my intake form, the same one Miss Hawthorne showed me, but annotated in my grandmother's cursive. Red ink circling words like delusional and manipulative, followed by sharp comments. This is not who she is. This is who they want her to be. And beneath it, folded with surgical precision, a letter dated 6 months before she died. My dearest child, if you're reading this, then they've already done what I feared they might. I tried to speak up, but my voice wasn't loud enough, not in that house. But I remember you. I remember the way your eyes lit up when you painted with sunflower yellow. The way you never cried when they ignored you, only blinked a little slower, like the world had disappointed you again. You were not difficult. You were awake. They don't fear your attitude. They fear your vision. Love always, Grandma Edith. I couldn't breathe. I clutched the letter like it was the only solid thing in a world that had been liquid for too long. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the common room while the others played cards and giggled over snacks. I stared out the window, letter trembling in my hands. She saw me. She always had. All those Sundays in her garden when she'd quietly ask, "Still drawing?" When she gave me blank notebooks instead of clothes for Christmas. When she taught me to press wildflowers between wax paper. She knew, and they knew she knew. The next day, I asked Ms. Hawthorne if I could retrieve a copy of my school application. She paused, then opened the same drawer with the same folder. I saw the signatures. My parents', but not mine. There were entire documents, psych evaluations, incident reports, statements, none of which I had ever seen. Some were. I didn't go home right away. I waited. Waited until my graduation from Fair Hollow, a muted ceremony with lukewarm applause and parents who barely showed up. Mine didn't come at all. I stepped off that wooden stage holding a diploma in one hand and a flash drive in the other, filled with every falsified report, every evaluation stamped with words that never belonged to me. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to return as myself, uninvited, unspoken, undeniable. So I waited until the perfect moment, the weekend of my sister's college send-off brunch. A family affair, of course. Country club lawn, white tents, catered mimosas, and music that sounded like it came pre-packaged in wedding magazines. I wore all black, not out of spite, but clarity. When I stepped onto the patio, time fractured. Forks paused mid-air. Laughter clipped mid-note. My mother's smile turned to porcelain. My father stood too quickly, almost knocking over his chair. My sister's glass slipped slightly in her hand. I walked slowly, deliberately, through a sea of startled stares. And when I reached the center table, I placed the letter from Grandma Edith and a single flash drive on my father's plate. "You left this unfinished," I said. Silence stretched wide across the table like a gash. He didn't pick it up, didn't even look at it, just glanced around nervously and muttered, "We can talk later." I shrugged. "Now's fine." My mother stood up, her voice tight. "This is neither the time nor the place." I smiled politely. "Strange. You thought it was the perfect time and place to announce my transfer at Lexi's wedding." Someone gasped. "Aunt Marianne, maybe?" My sister muttered something under her breath. I didn't catch it, didn't care. I turned to leave without another word, but as I walked past the buffet table, I heard the faintest clatter. The flash drive finally picked up. That sound rang louder than any apology ever could. When I reached the gate, Aunt Marianne followed me. She didn't speak at first. Just walked beside me, shoulders tense, hands clenched. Then she whispered, "She tried to protect you." I stopped. "She knew something was wrong?" she said, eyes shining. "Your grandmother, she told me. I tried to visit. They wouldn't let me in." "I know," I said softly. We stood there in silence. Then I opened my bag, pulled out a second flash drive. "Send it to the attorney Grandma used," I said. "It's time her real will was heard." Marianne nodded, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to steady. The reading of the will took place in a quiet office downtown. No chandeliers, no press, no family drama. Just me, Aunt Marianne, and Mr. Goldstein, my grandmother's attorney, who wore a suit so old it probably remembered her better than he did. He greeted us gently. Offered tea, neither of us accepted. "I've been waiting for this day," he said. "Edith left something unconventional." He opened a thin folder, pulled out 2 envelopes, one legal, one personal. The first will, the one my parents filed, was already known. But now, Mr. Goldstein slid the second across the desk. "She wrote this 6 months after the formal will. It's legally binding, witnessed, and sealed." I held my breath. He began to read. "To whom it may concern," he said, voice even, "and to those who will no doubt find this inconvenient." I smiled before I realized I was doing it. "I leave the Hudson farmhouse and surrounding land to my granddaughter, the one they tried to erase. My name, just mine, was written in capital letters, underlined once. I leave her my journals, my pressed flowers, my unfinished memoirs, and the trust fund meant for her education, which her parents declined to mention." Marianne reached over and squeezed my hand. The lawyer continued. "She was not chosen for her behavior. She was chosen for her courage, for her clarity. She saw the truth even when we made it dangerous to do so." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. "This house was built on survival. I hope she uses it to create." And then he handed me the second envelope, personal, unsealed. Inside, a single sentence handwritten in fading blue ink. You don't have to prove you're good to people who only fear you're strong. The room stayed still. No shouting, no arguments. Just the gravity of truth sinking into the walls. Mr. Goldstein cleared his throat. They can contest it, he said gently. But they didn't show up all at once. First, it was my sister, storming into the farmhouse 3 days later, flanked by entitlement and too much perfume. You always twist things? She snapped before she even sat down. They were just trying to help you. I stayed quiet, let her fill the silence with blame disguised as pity. You think Grandma saw you? She hissed. She didn't even know half of what you did. She knew enough, I said. Enough to leave me the one thing none of you could fake, her trust. She rolled her eyes. You're not a victim. No, I said. But I was silenced, and now, I'm not. She left without finishing her coffee. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was stiff, like a man trying to apologize without using the word. We were overwhelmed. Your mother was concerned. We thought you needed structure. You didn't think I deserved honesty? I replied. He paused. We did what we thought was right. I almost laughed. You did what was easiest. Then I hung up. The confrontation wasn't fire. It was ice. Controlled, cold, clean. But it wasn't over. Because the next morning, Ms. Hawthorne emailed me. Subject line, confirmation of records submitted. She had officially submitted her statement, under oath, confirming that my school reports had been based on parental requests, not behavior. She included emails, signatures. And then came Aunt Marianne. She brought a box of printed voicemails, letters Grandma had tried to send through her. Your mother intercepted them? She said. I didn't know how many until I went back and checked. We sat on the porch, flipping through proof. I didn't need them to admit it. Not anymore. I didn't need them to cry or explain or beg for forgiveness. There was a time I would have given anything just to hear, we were wrong. But that time had passed quietly, like a door closing in the middle of the night. I stood in the hallway of the farmhouse, the scent of cedar and old books wrapping around me like a memory. The house creaked with age, but it was mine. Every floorboard, every chipped tile, every crooked drawer, they all stayed, even when my family didn't. I walked into the back room, Grandma's old writing space, and stared at the long oak desk facing the window. The one she always said helped her watch thoughts grow. I set the flash drives down beside the typewriter. Then I said it aloud, to no one and everyone at once. I don't need to be loved anymore. I need to be real. And somehow, the room exhaled. The next day, I called the lawyer and told him I wouldn't be contesting anything further. They'll fall silent, he said. They usually do when the mirror doesn't flatter them. He was right. There were no more phone calls, no more text messages pretending nothing happened, no unexpected visits or last-minute apologies, just absence. And in that absence, I found something strange. Peace. It didn't roar like triumph. It whispered like truth. No courtroom victory could have given me that. I walked the property each morning barefoot, dew clinging to my toes, the sky always a little wider than I remembered. Everywhere I looked, I started small. A table, 4 chairs, one open sign scribbled on recycled cardboard. I called it the Wildflower Table. Not a business, at least not at first. It began as a creative circle. Once a week, I'd host kids from the local community. Quiet ones, misunderstood ones. The ones who drew too much or spoke too little or were told they felt too hard. We painted, wrote stories, pressed flowers into wax paper like my grandmother taught me. And slowly, the space grew. Aunt Marianne helped me file the paperwork to become a nonprofit. A local carpenter donated shelves. A retired teacher offered weekend workshops. One day, A girl named Brielle handed me a sketch of a sunflower with a note that said, "I don't feel broken here." I cried in the supply closet for 20 minutes. The farmhouse transformed. The dining room became a library. The attic, an art loft. The living room, our storytelling den. And on the mantel above the old fireplace, I placed one item, my childhood notebook. The one I thought they'd thrown away. Marianne had found it boxed in the attic behind faded holiday decorations. The pages were stained and torn, but my drawings were still there. Sunflowers. A house with wide windows. A little girl smiling under a yellow sky. I framed one page. One day, I'll build a place where kids don't have to hide. I'd written that when I was 10. Now, it hung above a room full of voices no one was trying to silence. I didn't tell this story to become anything. Not an advocate, not a hero, not even a teacher. I told it because somewhere in the world, another girl is being called too much when all she's ever been is awake. And if she stumbles across this story, I hope she knows there's space for her too. This morning, I woke up to sunlight slipping through the lace curtains Grandma stitched herself. The breeze carried that soft scent of lavender and something sweeter, wild grass maybe, or just time healing in the background. I stepped onto the porch barefoot, tea in hand, the wood warm beneath my feet. Across the field, the sun touched everything golden, and for the first time in years, my breath didn't come with weight. I didn't win. I didn't conquer. I just began again. The silence I once feared had become a friend. Not empty, just open. Not lonely, just peaceful. The mailbox creaked. Inside, a single envelope. No return name, just thank you. Probably from one of the parents, or maybe one of the kids. I didn't open it right away. Just smiled. In the studio, a new kid was waiting, nervous, fingernails chewed raw. Said he didn't like people much, but liked stories. I told him that's more than enough. He pointed to the framed notebook page on the mantel. "Did you draw that?" he asked. I nodded. "What happened to her?" I looked out the window. "She grew up," I said. But she never stopped drawing. The wind moved through the trees, soft as breath. And just like that, the story ended. Not with a slam, not with revenge, but with space. Space to create, to remember, to become. As I write these last lines, I don't know if anyone will remember my name, but maybe they'll remember the porch, the tea, the story. Maybe they'll remember that even silence has a sound when it's yours.